How's it going, everybody? As promised, after the underrated subclasses video, I've decided to go ahead and go with the most overrated subclasses. But I did something a little bit different this time. We got a little bit playful. So what we did is we asked our Patreon members as well as our YouTube watchers what their vote would be for the most overrated subclasses, and then I'm going to go ahead and compare and contrast my pick to theirs. Should be fun. Let's do it. All right, we're going to start out with the Artificer. And our patron members voted for the Battlesmith to be the most overrated of all the Artificers. Then we have YouTube, who voted for the Armorer as the most overrated of all the Artificer subclasses. And I can see why on both of those. Battlesmith might be considered overrated because it's considered the best of the best. And if it's considered the best of the Artificers, people are automatically going to be like, okay, that one's overrated because it's the best. However, personally, I actually think the Battlesmith's spot is well warranted. Very powerful, has high AC, has high saves, very difficult to kill. Battlesmiths are solid, along with their pet. Then we have the Armor, and I could see people saying Armor is overrated because they don't do much damage. And while I agree with that, I would say that they do their job well. They are specifically meant to tank, and they are very good at doing that particular job. Not a lot of builds tank for the whole entire team, where the Armor does. So, what's my pick? I'm actually picking the Alchemist. Now, many of you who just watched my other video are gonna be like, didn't you say Alchemist was the most underrated? Yes. But I also think it's the most overrated. It's the one that I think is assessed on either side the most inaccurately. Here's my take on Alchemist. It's playable. That's it. It's not good, it's playable. It's not non-playable, it's playable. So anyways, anytime I say the Alchemist is underrated, for example, I'll get a reply saying like, no, the Alchemist is horrible. And anytime I say the Alchemist isn't the best, people will be like, no, the Alchemist is just fine. No, it's weak. But it is playable. That's where the Alchemist is. All right, Barbarian. Same across the board. This one was the easiest for me to think of. It's the Totem Barbarian. No questions asked. Specifically the Bear, because that's the one everyone wants to pick because it's probably the strongest of the Totem Barbarians in most situations. But here's the thing about being the Bear Barbarian, is that your feature might sound amazing, but when you take into account that the 80% of the monsters you're going to face are going to be in bludgeoning, slashing, and piercing damage. In 80% of combats, you have no feature. You are featureless. Sure, in your 20% of combats where your feature does something, it's powerful, but when you compare and contrast that to someone like the Ancestral Guardian, who is the opposite, their feature is great in 80% of combats, and then 20% of combats is not going to work the best. So in any case, I think Bear Barbarians are assessed far higher than they really should be, and it seems like Patreon and YouTube both agree with me. Next up, we have Bard. Patreon and YouTube agree that it's Eloquence Bard. Now, I have a slight suspicion that this is due to Traint Monk's recent video on why the Eloquence Bard is overrated. I cannot agree though. I actually think Eloquence Bard is exactly as powerful as people think it is. It is an extremely powerful bard and really doesn't have a missed feature. All of their features are incredibly solid, so I cannot say it's overrated when I think it's rated pretty accurately. I'm actually going to go with Spirits for my choice. And the reason for that is that it's based off of the randomness of Spirits. Spirits is very difficult to control. You can't control what spirit feature you're going to roll when you use the special Bardic Inspiration feature. On top of that, once you hit level 6, you need to do a seance and you need your teammates to cooperate with you, and that isn't guaranteed. Sometimes they won't cooperate with you and you can't get the spell slots that you need. It just has a lot of area for wonkiness and things to go wrong. Don't get me wrong, I love Spirits Bard, I think it's a lot of fun, and randomness is fun, but when we're talking about assessing a class, I think it puts it lower than most people would put it. Cleric, again, Patreon and YouTube both agree that it's the Tempest Cleric, and I can almost guarantee that the reason for that is because of their spell list. They don't get enough lightning damage to make their channel divinity really shine. They're really forced to do Call Lightning as their only real option to be dropping a lot of lightning damage, and that genuinely is a shame. And I think it is fair to say that it is overrated, but I wouldn't say it's the most overrated. Now, my choice for the most overrated cleric is going to be a controversial one. I'm going with the Forge Cleric. Don't get me wrong, I love the Forge Cleric. I think it's the best beginner cleric there is. However, when you just do a straight assessment, I think it is overrated. Not bad, it's great, but it's overrated because of the way it's assessed. So on one end, you have a feature that gives you a +1 to either your weapon or your armor, so long as it's non-magical. So what happens when they're magical? Well, you're going to lose that benefit. Now, I admit that will probably be not very often the case. More likely than not, you're going to get at least one or the other to work for you. From there, you have a subpar channel divinity. You're going to get your resistance to fire, and you're going to get a bit more tankiness. So basically, everything you're investing in is going towards your tankiness. It does make you good at spiritual guardians, but it's not doing anything crazy. It's not doing anything that is incredibly overpowered. It comes down to a couple extra AC, which is good. Forge Clerics are good. They can do a lot of damage. They're just fine, but they are overrated. They are assessed higher than they really should be. All right, we're all in agreement when it comes to the Druid across the board. Patreon, YouTube, and myself all say Moon Druid is the most overrated. This is because Moon Druid scaling is ridiculous. You come in as probably the strongest subclass in the entire game for a couple levels, and then from there, your animals are almost completely worthless, and you might as well be a straight druid. Then at the very end, at level 20, okay, now we're back to doing incredible animal things, and again, we're OP. So there's no really point where Moon Druid feels right. You're either too powerful or too weak. That's how Moon Druid is, and for the majority of your levels, we're talking between probably 5 and 19, you're underpowered, which isn't a great feeling. Fighter, Patreon and YouTube both chose Eldritch Knight. I'm guessing they chose Eldritch Knight because of its limited build options. Basically, Eldritch Knight is very restraining in what it allows you to build. Building a dual-wielding Eldritch Knight is incredibly awkward because your bonus action is heavily taken. Now, for me personally, again, super controversial take here, I'm going with the Battle Master. Whoa, no, like everyone, Battle Master can fit into so many builds, it's so incredible, everyone uses Battle Master. Well, that's because it's versatile. Battle Master is incredibly versatile, but it's not the master of one, even among the fighters. If we're talking about straight personal tankiness, the Eldritch Knight beats out the Battle Master. So if you are doing a very bulky build, Eldritch Knight is better. If you're looking for someone to strike really hard, then the Samurai wins the Battle Master outright. So the Battle Master is really good because of their flexibility and versatility, ability to multi-class extremely well, but them being like the premier fighter all the time is not the case. It really depends on what you're looking for, and so I'm assessing it lower because there are times that other builds shine, and I think people forget that when it comes to the Battle Master. When it comes to the Monk, Patreon and YouTube both said the Shadow Monk. I get why as well. Basically, you're popping out of the shadows and tickling someone instead of actually murking them. It's a very popular class because shadows are cool, we're dark and edgy, right? I would agree that it is overrated because a lot of people take this class and it really doesn't perform the way they would hope, but that is not my choice. My choice is the Astral Self Monk. I've done a build and a deep assessment into every single monk, and the Astral Self is by far the most awkward to build. You really want to invest in wisdom. You really, really want to invest in wisdom, but that gives you a lot of awkward levels, and then it makes your key really inefficient because just to turn on your ability to use wisdom as your primary takes key. So you already are a key efficient class. Now that is compounded, as well as having weak levels on an already weak class. It is very, very difficult to have a playthrough as Astral Self Monk, but once you hit those late levels, or if you're starting late, you can do some really wicked awesome things, but for most people, Astral Self is just plain awkward. Paladin. Patreon and YouTube say Oathbreaker, and I can almost guarantee this is because of their 7th level feature that makes it so the undead around you gain a bonus to their damage equal to your charisma modifier, and you can't turn that off. So anytime you're facing a bunch of zombies, you just buff them. However, I actually really like Oathbreaker, and I like Oathbreaker because I think its potential to do just stupid, absolutely stupid amounts of damage is really high. And I think that it's one of the best use cases for doing a dual-wielding paladin or a polearm master spear and shield paladin. You can get your damage into absolute stupid town, and I think it's a lot of fun. Okay, but let's say we're playing Curse of Strahd. No, do not do Oathbreaker. Absolutely not. But in some campaigns, we're talking about the Princes of the Apocalypse. Yeah, in that case, maybe consider going Oathbreaker. I think you're going to have a lot of fun. And this is coming down to what is the most overrated. I wouldn't say Oathbreaker is particularly overrated. I think it's pretty well known at this point that that feature can beat the crap out of you and your team, and you can get your team killed. So I think that's pretty well assessed in their value, and most people value them pretty low. So for me, I'm actually doing, and this is gonna be it. You would be able to argue with me all day and probably win that argument, to be frank, but I'm gonna put the Oath of Watchers. The Oath of Watchers is good. It's really good, but here's my problem with it, is it's damn near flavorless. So what are your amazing features? Well, you have a great channel divinity that gives your team advantage on wisdom, intelligence, and charisma saving throws. That's probably in the top 3 channel divinities that paladins get, but it just feels bland. Then you get a really good 7th level feature where everyone gets advantage on their initiative checks in combat. That's really good as well. So I think it would be fair to say Oath of Watchers is potentially the best paladin. You know, I think all paladins are very good, but I think it would be fair to say that they are potentially the best paladin. I think they're overrated because they're bland. I know that's not how this video is supposed to be. I know I'm cheating right now, but I cannot bring myself to do anyone else. They're bland. Ranger, Patreon and YouTube both chose Gloomstalker. I'm guessing this is because Gloomstalker is the best. I think that it's easy to say whoever's the best is the most overrated, but Gloomstalker I don't think is overrated. I think it's exactly as good as people think it is. Really freaking good. So puts me in an awkward position. I have to go with Horizon Walker myself. And I think the reason I say this is that when people read Horizon Walker, they get it in their head that they're gonna be this really badass teleporting ninja guy who's shooting arrows and teleporting all over the battlefield, or smacking enemies and hitting 4 at a time because they're teleporting around. And that can be the case if you're past level 11, but everything before 11 is hot garbage. It is a slog to play early level Horizon Walker, which is a shame. It truly is a shame because their 11th level feature is incredible. And so that is more what I would consider overrated, you know? They're overrated because you get this idea in your head of how awesome and powerful they're gonna be, but then it's not the case. That's overrated. Gloomstalkers are just good. Rogue. Both Patreon and YouTube said Arcane Trickster. I'm not sure what the reasoning is here. I think, as far as I was aware, Arcane Tricksters were always assessed pretty well without any big major weaknesses. They have flexibility to do different play styles. They have the ability to mix infiltration with spells. I'm not seeing where they're overrated. I think they're rated pretty fairly. And this one was boring for me to choose. I didn't want to choose this one, but in good faith, I kind of just had to, and it had to be Assassin, because the Assassin's, you know, raw features really take away from what you expect it to do. You expect to jump out of the shadows and kill someone, and you have that potential, but the way the game works as raw, it's going to really withhold you from meeting that potential in a lot of ways, which is a big bummer. On top of that, I think Assassins should do interesting things with poison, right? Why isn't poison a part of this? They should get a bonus action and apply poison to their weapon feature. They should get some cool stuff to do with poisons. And yeah, so anyways, I think Assassins are wildly overrated. More because of mechanics than intention, I think. Sorcerer, we're all in agreement. It's wild magic. And this kind of goes back to why I chose Spirit's Bard, which is you're introducing too many uncertain elements. You have wild magic that can kill your team, but on top of that, now you're relying on your DM to restore your wild magic, and they're thinking about other stuff. So it kind of puts you in this weird position of like, asking your DM pretty consistently for the whole campaign. It's really awkward, but we don't play wild magic because we're like, let's be the most powerful, most optimized build. Now do we? We play wild magic because it's fun to roll dice and have random crap happen. I think wild magic is awesome, but if we're rating it on power level, I think it'd be fair to say it's overrated. All right, Patreon on YouTube are saying Warlock Hexblade is the most overrated. You know, this one I'm kind of in between. I could see it being the same thing where it's just the most powerful. And so people are saying, well, it's the most powerful, it must be overrated. My most common sentiment I've heard about Hexblade is that it's a ridiculous multi-class, but a pretty fair straight class. And I would say that's a pretty fair assessment. Now, I might be wrong. There might be people who are saying it's actually truly not as good as people think it is. And I have seen situations where that's the case, mostly while multi-classing, where I'll be doing a Paladin and Sorcerer multi-class, and people are really tempted to get that one level in Hexblade Warlock, but it's a trap. that in certain situations, very niche situations, it isn't the right play. But that kind of tells you how niche it would have to be for it not to be the right play, how overwhelmingly good Hexblade is as a multi-class. I couldn't personally choose Hexblade. Unfortunately, I want to. I think it is way overdone. I don't think it's a balanced class. I think it's one of the biggest problematic classes there is, but it's not overrated. It's exactly where it should be as, yeah, that's too powerful, especially as a multi-class. So I went with, this one is controversial as well, Undying. Why? People know Undying is crap. Well, it's the worst. No matter how well you rate Undying, it's too high. It is the most garbage subclass in the entire game. I would say Alchemist is redeemable, not Undying. Undying has nothing redeeming about it. I have racked my brain trying to think of a niche build I could build with it, and the only one I've come up with is the Possum strategy, which is playing dead. It has nothing. Prove me wrong, please. I hate the Undying. Then we have Wizard. Wizard, Patreon tied. They had a tie for Divination and Blade Singing. YouTube went with Blade Singing. Now I'm looking at those, and Blade Singing I gotta put into the realm of it's the best, so let's vote against it. Because Blade Singing is ridiculously good. Here's the thing, I've done 500 builds and counting, and every time I am wanting to build any type of Gish, Blade Singing is always the better version. If I'm wanting to do Sorcerer Gish, okay, but Blade Singer does it better, okay? I want to do this cool Alchemist Gish, okay, but Blade Singer does it better. That's across the board. Blade Singing does Gish better than anyone else, to the point where it's frustrating as a character builder how often I build a build that would just be better as a Blade Singer. So no, I don't think it's underrated. I actually think it's rated completely fairly. To say it's ridiculous. Divination, there's more argument. Divination comes in incredibly powerful, but then it really doesn't have too much that you get throughout its lifespan. It really lives and breathes Portent. But the thing about Portent is you get it level 2. And so the thing it lives and breathes is always there. I think it would be fair to say it's overrated as a whole, but I wouldn't say it's the most overrated. Personally, what I would say the most overrated wizard is necromancy. Necromancy, the idea is you're gonna have this horde of undead that you're going to be able to command and use at will. But in reality, it's a lot of micromanagement, and you're gonna have them dying all the time, and your spell slot usage is gonna get really wonky, and the paperwork that goes into doing necromancy, it can actually really stub your toe. It can really make trying to build that big group a big pain in the ass, only to get fireballed, and now your whole group is decimated. And now those spell slots that you were thinking were gonna be 4 zombies per spell slot are now 1 zombie per spell slot. And all of a sudden this big, huge, efficient army that you were looking at is reduced to rubble. This is before even talking about the problem of bringing so many summons to a combat and that the effect it has on the table. I've always hated that effect. I think anyone who's seen me knows I really don't like that effect. I think even without taking that into consideration, necromancy is the most overrated subclass. All right, well, there were a bunch of hot takes in this video, so I know most of you have already probably gone down there, typed what your opinion is, and I think that's awesome. I'd love to hear it. Tell me where I'm wrong. Tell me where you agree. Tell me any thoughts you have. Give me your own list. I'd love to see it. All right, guys, you've been awesome. Hope you have yourselves a wonderful day, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.